Greetings and welcome to this week's episode of the platform Let's Talk About It. I'm your host, Jasmine Harden, and I'm here to create a space for Black minds, voices, and culture to thrive. Thank you for tuning in, and let's get into this episode. This is Joseph joining me here on the podcast. Let's give it up for Joe. I played the applause button. You could.
I was hoping so. I certainly will.
No, I got you. Play up on the Himalaya. So we're not gonna be here long. We're just gonna chit chat a little bit about a topic that I felt like is something we as individuals speak about a lot, just on our own personal level. And it's been a topic that has been reoccurring in 2023 specifically, I've noticed. And it's only February, which is why I felt the need to come up here and talk about it. And we're just going to talk about anxiety. And we're specifically going to talk about its relationship to social media and the way that social media can influence your experiences of anxiety, or how it can be an anxiety producing interaction that we deal with daily. So I just want to start off and ask you, why do you think that I chose you to talk about this with me? Like, I know I kind of gave you my spiel, but I wanted to know your perspective and why you felt like you would have some good, addition to conversation.
I think you can gather from the conversations that we've had that I'm at least somewhat of a wise man. And clearly I use social media. And I have, I won't say a lot of experience, but knowledge about anxiety and how it affects people, including myself, and what social media can result as that.
And I'll add to that and say that all of what you said for sure, and you are a man.
My sister was asking me about the podcast. I definitely said like the podcast was meant for Black women. And then I had to correct myself, and I was like, I don't think it's specifically meant for Black women. I think it's meant for Black people in general. But in me listening to it, sometimes it can feel like it's catered towards Black women just because you're a Black woman. You see things from Black women's perspective. So that's why I initially said that when asked about the podcast. But I did correct myself. I was like, you know what? It's a podcast for Black people and a platform for you to be able to speak on issues that you see in the community.
For sure. And that's a goal of mine this year, to just to really brand the podcast and just make it as well-rounded as possible, because I could understand why it could be geared, even down to my statistics of listeners are majority women. I have a good percentage of men listening though, so shout out to y'all. But it definitely is understandable for it to come across like it's geared towards women, and I want to do my part in making all people feel welcome to come share this space with me. So
I also want to add to my answer that I can add well-roundedness to the podcast. That's probably part of the reason why you would chose me too.
You were saying that you feel like you are going to be able to help this podcast, this platform, to become a more well-rounded. And why do you think that is?
Because I'm a man. I feel like that's the easiest way to describe that. I'm a man, you're a woman. We see things differently. I've had a completely different experience in life than you have, although some things are similar. But I have a male experience or a male perspective that you don't have at all.
It creates a opportunity for learning from multiple perspectives. Balance, for sure. So to segue off of that, my first question was, what are aspects of social media that you believe make it anxiety producing? from your perspective specifically as not only a black male, but as someone who grew up in a period kind of, born in a period of time where we kind of saw the before social media was normalized for young children and children in general, up into where it is now, where it's everywhere.
I'd say two things. The first would be like a destruction of individuality. So growing up without social media, like being a kid, and this could also be just because you're a kid, but I feel like it was a lot easier for people's own thoughts and how they wanted to dress and the kind of music that they listened to. Like all of those things were, there was no pressure on you to conform to like whatever the social norm was. So there are social norms no matter what, like before social media or after social media, but they weren't as prevalent as they are now for you to be feeling like, okay, this is how I'm supposed to dress. If I'm not fly, or this is what I'm supposed to be listening to, or whatever. And I'd say another point, I would say comparison as well. And that kind of goes into the first point, but just having so much exposed to you and not, if you're not grounded in your individuality, it can be easy for you to compare. And we say all the time, like comparison is the thief of joy. So if whatever you have, you're looking on social media and comparing it to what the next man has, you'll never be happy with what you have.
Yeah.
Like what's the J. Cole song say? I can't remember the lyrics, but like love yours, the whole theme of that song, that to life, like whatever you have.
Yeah, for sure. And me and Jazz were actually talking about that. Jazz has been on the podcast before. Shout out to her. Y'all know her. But
Can we have a
me,
round of applause for Jazz?
yeah, round of applause. Yeah, we were talking about that literally yesterday, just how, quote unquote influencers that we used to like, we can't really engage in their content as much anymore just because the market is just becoming so heavily like advertisement, marketing, sponsorships, this, to the point where you're not even getting that, genuine content anymore. And it's hard to connect with the content because it's like, well, what if I don't want to buy stuff? What if I just wanted to come on here and laugh at you because you're funny and I like your personality? But now all your vlogs are, oh, this sponsorship, oh, this sponsorship, oh, I'm going here for this brand or whatever. And it can just make things hard to connect with because it's like, I don't want to feel like I can't get on your content and feel like I'm gonna get pressured into buying something that I don't need. Like I won't even be thinking about certain things and then I watch something and now it's like, no, I want it. And it can cause anxiety if you have the resources or you're not in the position to do that at that moment, or it's just not a priority, quite frankly. And now your brain's like, well, now you're less than because that person's the same age as you and they have all these followers and they're doing this and they're doing that. And it can just be a lot, to say the least.
Can I tag on to this point?
Of course.
Okay, so this is from the perspective of not just a man, but as a believer of God. And it can produce, like social media can produce anxiety in that aspect because, can I cuss on the podcast? I can't cuss.
You could cuss. Even though, look, you talking about God, talking about some, can I cuss?
You're right. Okay, look, I'll use my dad. It's a lot of foolishness on social media, and that in itself can produce anxiety unintentionally. Because, okay, a perfect example, and like this isn't in anything specific, but I've been telling you, I don't get on Twitter and go through my timeline anymore because there's so much, again, foolishness on the timeline to where if you're not grounded in your spirituality or in whatever grounds you, that it can easily affect how you're feeling. And it's like, I shouldn't be able to go on social media and see something like what happened in Memphis, and it makes me mad. Like that is an anxiety producing feeling because now I'm watching this and I'm legitimately angry. Like my entire day has changed now because I see somebody black getting their ass whooped on social media, handcuffed by 5 niggas. Like that doesn't it, and there's too much of that. Like that's one specific incident, but it can be in so many different ways and so many different things that you can see that can somebody like somebody so and so got shot, so and so kid. Like it's just so it can easily be draining. It can easily drain you all the energy that you have.
And I want to expound on that, not too much, but just for if anyone who isn't black is listening, why it's anxiety producing is because when you see representation of yourself on the television and you don't see it often, let's start there. And then when you do see it, it's in such a horrific light. You have no choice but to identify with that, especially when that person looks like you and it could easily be you in that situation. So, for sure. And I want to also say that I think that became very, very prevalent for me as well, especially with Twitter specifically during COVID. Because when I tell you, especially during 2020 specifically, you could get on the timeline and see something hilarious, and then you could get on the timeline and see something completely soul crushing. And that's draining. Like, draining. So yes, all of those things for sure. So next question. I know you mentioned that you don't get on your timeline on Twitter specifically. That's one, practice that you use to minimize, its ability to do that for you. So the next thing, what are ways that you minimize its impact on your general feelings of like security and safety? And what advice would you possibly be able to give listeners, especially because I want to say, I see you 18 to 20, 23 year olds. That's my biggest listening group. So, to anybody in that age group or even older, do you have any advice to give listeners?
Yeah, that's a good question. And like you said, one thing I do is I don't really like scroll my timeline. That's not something I want to do. But you also have the power to kind of not completely because people like stuff will just pop up on your timeline from something that you don't follow or you don't interact with even this type of content and stuff will just pop up. Like the algorithm does whatever it wants to an extent, but you can control the people you're following and the things that you're seeing. The other way would be taking some time away from it and establishing yourself outside of it. So again, as you would know, because we have these conversations, there was periods of time where I wasn't on any social media at all for a while. And not that social media is the worst thing ever, but if you're not stable and grounded in your own things, then anything can come in and mix up whatever you have going on. So in order for me to feel like, okay, these are my own thoughts, these are my own wants, I had to take some time away from that. So now I can get back on social media, which again, I'm sure you probably noticed I've been on social media a little bit more lately because now I feel like I have a more stable foundation to be on it and it really don't matter. Like the only reason I tell you all the time, the only reason I get on social media is to laugh. Like that's the sole reason I get on there. I get on there to have a good time, to laugh, maybe find some new music, and I'm out of there. But I can use it as that now. Whereas I used to be like when I was young and more immature, like I used to tweet what I was thinking all the time, or if something got on my nerves, like I put a tweet out, or just stuff like that. To where that's not what I need to use social media. So just being smart in how you're using it and what you're letting in your ears and like eyes, what you're seeing and what you're hearing matters. So be very intentional in what you let in.
I definitely agree with that, especially like, me and you, we've talked about how, especially again, really driving home the fact that the 18 to 22, 23-year-olds are listening the most to this. But a lot of us have social media addictions, and it doesn't just affect the younger generations, but because we grew up with the onset of it really young. And I don't want to say they don't look at it as something that's harmful, but they don't look at it as something that you actively participate in, and that's why it is harmful. Because, like you said, you are an active participant on your social media. If you aren't seeing things that you want to see, then do something. And if you need to take a step away, that's okay. You aren't going to miss out on anything you need. Statistics show, and I don't have the statistics pulled up. You can look it up if you want to fact check me. But I know statistics and research has shown that a big reason why people engage with social media is because they're afraid of missing out on something. And as you, I'm sure you can say in your experience as well, and as well as mine, when I've removed myself from social media, I still find out everything. Like, you're not gonna completely just be under a rock. You may miss some things. You're not gonna miss out on things if you make it yourself a priority in that you'll still be able to find out the things that you need to know. Okay, so next question. This is interesting. It's kind of a devil's advocate, I guess, type of question because we just talked about ways you can minimize its impact on your anxiety. But now I want to talk about how do you feel users can maximize their use of social media because I know you as well as I believe, and you believe that it is still a tool that can be used for benefit. As you can see, I'm on the podcast. I have to use social media and things to promote the podcast. So, how are ways that you believe people can maximize their use of it?
I'll say using social media. Of course, we all know social media can bring eyes that otherwise would have never been on whatever you're trying to build. So whether it's a YouTube channel or it's a podcast, it's your cooking business, you do hair, you do lashes, nails, whatever you do, using social media to promote your business is essential right now. Like if you're not, you're working from a deficit, honestly. But I do also want to add in that I it's possible to do things without that. Like there's plenty of black businesses that are like older businesses that have been able to operate off word of mouth. Like not necessarily. You have to have some sort of internet presence, but you don't have to be the most active participant on social media for whatever business endeavors you have to be successful. But social media can skyrocket that process. Whereas years ago, it could have taken you 5, 10 years to get a consistent clientele or customer base, just pretty much working off of the resources that you have available to you in your environment. Now, if you're posting every day, like if you're consistent and you're posting and promoting whatever your business or whatever your side hustle or whatever your dream may be, somebody's going to see it. Like it doesn't matter where you're starting from. Everybody has to start somewhere, but somebody's going to see it. And all it takes is for that ball to get rolling. One post or one thing to go viral, and your life has changed for forever. What do you think about it?
I think that what you're saying is so accurate. And I want to add to that by saying it's actually something else I recently, it's probably the same conversation with Jazz, but we were talking about, because I was expressing to her how Instagram specifically, there's just a level of like anxiety, overwhelming, I don't know what you want to call it, but it can just be too much for me to the point where I don't engage with it the way that I could or that used to be able to, I can even say. But now it's like, ugh. But I she's a business owner. She has to promote her business on social media. Social media is a big part of her business running practice. So she was empathizing with me, saying like, yeah, I definitely understand, and I also have learned ways to not allow it to do that to me. And it's kind of connected to what we were talking about in the last question of minimizing its impact on your anxiety. I think when you first minimize the impact, like you said, maybe taking a step away, purging your social media, whatever you have to do that, and then being able to go back in with a more targeted, driven approach to know, like, okay, this is what I'm using it for. This is how long I'll be on it, like, and having that intentional interaction with it and disciplined interaction, and recognize, like, for me, I get on there only on my podcast page because I know that I don't want to have to deal with what comes with my personal page. I haven't purged through my personal page yet. I haven't done all those things. So I'll just get on my social media page, post what I need to post, check on who I, can at the time, and then I move on. And, that's been helping a lot, especially because my podcast page typically does have a lot less foolishness on it because I'm following other podcasts. I'm following things that are related to that account. So more positive input. And when I recognized that, it really helped me to um, have a bit less of a negative, like, rolls eyes attitude towards it because, like you said, especially depending on your business field, like I'm doing a podcast, I have to engage with listeners, like that's a part of growing the community that I want. It's on the internet. So I kind of have to. And I was shying away from it a lot, which is why another part of why I took a big hiatus because I didn't feel like I was doing what I could on that front and I was just being really harsh on myself. But yeah, like I recognize now that, okay, if I'm going to do this, certain things also have to be done, but how am I going to do it to where I don't lose myself in the process? And I think that that's important. Being able to, like what we said earlier, balance, being able to find that balance um, is so important because I do think that it can be a tool, but just like any tool, it can easily be a weapon utilized against us, especially because the people who are creating these algorithms and all that stuff, they don't care. They are a business and they are trying to make money. They do not care about your mental health. They do not care about your anxiety. They don't care about any of that. So if you don't care, why, how are you going to protect yourself? Because they're not going to. So, okay, last question. Why, in your opinion, do you feel like it is or is not important to have a personal brand on the internet?
I think it can be important and unimportant depending on what you're doing, of course. So, like we were just talking about in the last conversation or the last question, if you have a personal brand that is tied to a business that you're trying to push, or if you're using your social media strategically, then this is very important. Like I tell you all the time, the brand is everything. You have to stick to the brand, whatever your brand, whatever your brand may be. So, like you were saying about in your conversation with Jab earlier, you don't like to feel like every time you get on Instagram or every time you try and engage with people who are on social media or on whatever outlet through technology that you're using, you don't want to always feel like somebody's trying to sell you something. That can feel inauthentic to whatever brand that they have now. I'm sure whenever you first started interacting with whoever this person was, they weren't doing it with the idea to try and sell you on anything or try and push you to do anything, like to push you to buy something or to go somewhere or to do something. They were giving you authentic content based off of whatever they wanted the world to see about them and their experiences. And as you get more money or as sponsorships come in or as whatever may happen, then it starts to look and feel like, okay, you're not sticking to the brand that I initially bought into and wanted to be a part of. Now you're just looking to make some money, or you have a position to make some more money and you want to benefit off the back of it, which isn't necessarily the worst thing ever from their perspective, but always be real to your brand. I think people can tell very quickly and very easily, like, and social media will tell you that when someone's being unauthentic to their brand, like you're not being the person that we've known you to be. Social media has allowed us as normal people to be able to watch people develop from start to finish. So if I were to go, if you and me were to go get famous and just be billionaires and be able to do whatever we want, people can look at our tweets and our Instagram posts from when we were in high school and see, okay, this is the kind of person that you were then. We watched who you are develop. We know what you have to offer to us. So now when we see this finished product and we see what you're giving us, we can tell this is no longer sticking to your brand. And when you're not being real to your brand, nobody, at least I won't say nobody, but the people who were there for you in the beginning, the people who supported you, like the people who wanted to be a part of that, no longer want to be a part of the brand. But on the flip side, if you're not using social media strategically to promote a brand, to have a brand, to market yourself, then I don't think it's very important at all. I think that's when you can get into the space that I'm in currently. And I would like to use social media to begin promoting some things, but I'm not at that point yet where I just use it to, like you were saying, stay updated on certain information and to laugh and to find out new things. Like that's the core reasons for what I'm using it. And if you're not using it to establish and promote a brand, I think you should be, again, very intentional on the reasons why you're using it.
Put that very nicely because for sure, I definitely think that having a brand on social media is so important. That's why I look at others' posts and I shake my head if I'm being completely frank with you. And it's only because the brand is eclectic. The brand is all over the place, to say the least. Like it comes across like you are using this as a diary question mark slash I don't know photo album slash I don't know therapy. I don't you know what I mean? Like it can be a lot. And it can people can get caught up and just start putting stuff out that nobody needs to know, for lack of a better way of putting that. And that's the reason why I said that, because I find often that it's like I find myself asking why. Like this person couldn't possibly have asked themselves, why am I about to post this before they posted it? Because there's just no, we didn't need to know this. And then there's the double-edged sword of, people, especially people who are of influence or have some type of following. They'll say like, "Oh, you know, y'all are so mean and so this on the internet and you do this." And I agree, people are definitely ruthless. But it's also like, but if you put it out there, how can you be upset that people then interact with it? Because that is kind of the purpose behind social media. Social media isn't meant to be a diary. Let's be real. It wasn't created to do that. But if you utilize it in that way, the return of you utilizing it in that way, you have to be prepared for what comes with that. And that's a big reason why I put that question in there, because I just feel like people, I know even from a young age, I saw myself as like a brand. Like I tell people all the time in professional environments, I'm a brand. Okay. Like I do not play those games. I am a brand. You will, from the day I interview to the day I leave, you will have a consistent continuity of brand with me because I don't play. I don't like people thinking that I'm not about something. And when you have a brand and when you carry yourself, even on social media, like you're about something, then, like you said, whether or not people get along with that brand or not, if you look back at this person and see what their brand is, there should be no uproar of like, oh, where is this coming from? Like, no, I've been this way. You're just, you know, getting with the program. So, and I find that that happens often with celebrities, like you said, on social media. You see that happen, but it's not just a celebrity thing, it's a people thing. Best believe people from high school who have been following you since you were young are still following you, looking to see if you're still on that brand now. Like, that's just how people are. So, if you don't carry yourself that way, you open yourself up to me, what comes across as people not being able to take you seriously, personally. I don't know if you had anything to add to that.
I do just want to add one thing that's real quick, that we've said this before, but this is not to bash social media or how anybody uses it. It's just a warning. I won't even say a warning, but just a gentle word of advice. If you're going to use it for personal use, be careful in how you do it. And be careful in how you do it either way, business or personal. Be careful in how you use it and be intentional on what you're putting out into the metaverse and what you're receiving back. That's all.
For sure. I think growing up, we heard it a lot in the context of like, oh, these jobs will look at the stuff you post, so you need to be careful and, try to make it like a professional thing. And in reality, it's a life thing.
The worst example of that was anybody who was an athlete in high school who felt like they couldn't post or cuss or do anything on social media because they might not go to college for it. Like, I'm gonna lose my D1 dreams if I tweet this video or such and such. And that's just ridiculous. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous pressure for someone in high school who's 14, 15 years old to have like, oh, I feel like I gotta be perfect on this because my football coach or my basketball coach told me that if I'm posting certain things or if I'm portraying myself in a certain way, then nobody's going to want to recruit me, or I can't go play ball at nobody college, which isn't necessarily true, but it does go into what you're saying, to where you are a brand and people will be able to see your brand, and whether it's fair or not, develop opinions on you as a person based off of the brand that you put out to other people. Sure. That's why we're saying be intentional in what you're putting out and what you're receiving back.
For sure. Because what people don't realize is that when you put it out there on the internet, it no longer is within your control. Like you said, whether you want to argue all until you're blue in the face, whether or not it's fair, doesn't really matter because it's still going to happen. That's just the game that you're playing. So at least be advantageous with your approach with that game. And like you said, it's not to say you have to be perfect on social media, but when you're engaging with it, know that there's purpose behind everything that you do. So if you post something, know that somebody's going to see this. Think about who you may or may not want to see what you're about to post before you post it, because somebody could see it. It's happened to me plenty of times where I'll think, oh, I'm just posting something. And then somebody will be like, oh, I saw you post. Like, what? What in the world? So, and I don't even have a lot of followers. So, that's why I use celebrities as my example, because they have a large following and we can see it it's a more common thing that happens with them. But it happens to all of us. Like, you have a brand too. Just because you don't have a large following, or even if you do, regardless of how the number, people can see what you post. So just be intentional. I want to thank you for joining me on the podcast. I wanted to open the floor to any closing remarks you may have and just express my appreciation for you jumping on and talking about this, because I think this is important.
Thank you for having me. Now that you mentioned it, I do have a closing remark. And it's not a general remark, but it is a point towards the first question that you asked, and saying, what are the aspects of social media that can make it anxiety producing as a Black male.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely feel like seeing, especially Black men and women, go at it how we do on social media. To me, I don't think that's anxiety producing, but it is very divisive. And I don't think that's how things were intended to be. I don't think it does anything but hurt us in the long run. But I think people can get on social media, like you said, with the wrong intentions and use it as like a diary or use it as a place where I can just pour my heart out into and not realizing that, okay, whatever you're saying affects other people. People see it and people can either align with it or disagree with it. And that causes, it has effect. That's it. That's all. There's cause and effect to that.
I agree. And to add to your point, I think that you said it's not anxiety producing, but I think maybe you've gotten to a point where it's not anxiety producing, but I do think it can be for sure for people, especially if you're not grounded. Like you said, the things you say can affect people. So not only be intentional with your use for you, but to be intentional with your use for others because you just never know. You never know who's going to see it, and how what you say can affect somebody. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you for being here.
Thank you, Jasmine.
I just want to express my gratitude for you taking time out of your day to share this space with me. I hope this episode was meaningful and you leave feeling enriched. I appreciate you for being a part of this community of listeners and I hope you gain some fulfillment out of your day. Please do not forget to go follow us here and on all social media platforms. You can find us on Instagram at the platform LTAI podcast and Twitter at the platform LTAI. Also, share any episodes that you've enjoyed with loved ones. I appreciate any help getting this community to grow. Sending positivity your way, this is your host, Jasmine, signing off. Stay safe, stay well, and farewell.